From academic circles to the Vatican's corridors, the Shroud of Turin continues to spark both debate and devotion. Some skeptics dismiss it as an obvious fake, yet for believers, the shroud is a profound symbol, especially given that Jesus left no physical trace of himself on earth. Recently, new evidence has emerged, evidence that could transform our understanding of this enigmatic relic and the man it supposedly depicts. Could modern technology unlock the truth behind its origins and authenticity? Join us on this exciting journey as the Shroud of Turin unveils a stunning revelation about Jesus Christ. The Shroud of Turin, also known as the Holy Shroud, is deeply revered, particularly within the Catholic Church. Many believe it to be the very cloth that wrapped Jesus after his crucifixion, bearing an image that fires the imagination. This extraordinary piece of fabric measures about 14 feet long and 3 feet wide, woven from flax fibers using a unique technique. Most intriguing is the faint yet clear image imprinted on the cloth, depicting a man viewed from both front and back with his hands gently crossed over his lower torso. These mirrored images align along the cloth's center, each facing in opposite directions, encapsulating the essence of its mystery. The figure depicted on the shroud exudes a powerful presence, with a beard, mustache, and flowing hair that add to his aura of strength and dignity. Remarkably, the image also shows faint reddish-brown marks corresponding to the wounds described in the biblical accounts of Jesus' crucifixion, intensifying the mystery surrounding the shroud. Experts have debated the figure's height, estimating it to be between 5-7 inches and 6-2. Adding another layer of fascination to this ancient artifact. In 1532, a tragic fire ravaged the chapel in Chambéry, France, where the revered shroud was kept. The intense heat left the fabric marred with holes and charred edges, casualties of its encounter with molten silver during the blaze. To repair these damages, skilled nuns from the Poor Clare order carefully sewed 14 large triangular patches and 8 smaller ones onto the cloth, demonstrating their dedication to preserving its sanctity. Then, in the spring of 1898, an Italian photographer named Secondo Pia had a rare opportunity to photograph the shroud. This groundbreaking event marked the first time the relic had been captured on film, revealing a surprising revelation. The human likeness imprinted on the cloth appeared with striking clarity in the black and white negative, surpassing its visibility in its natural sepia hue. This discovery remains significant, providing valuable insights into the intricacies of the shroud and its enduring mystery. Subsequently, in 1931, photographer Giuseppe Enri embarked on a similar venture, producing photographic evidence that echoed Pia's findings. Further progress was made in 1978 when ultraviolet photography provided fresh insights into the relic, delving deeper into its mysteries. Displayed in a church in north-central France, the shroud revealed a negative image imbued with three-dimensional details unmatched by traditional paintings. Then, in a pivotal moment in 2022, meticulous conservation efforts in Italy uncovered a remarkable discovery. Removing the 16th century cloth backing revealed a distinct stitching pattern on the reverse of the shroud, resembling that found exclusively at Masada Fortress in Israel, a connection to antiquity that bolsters the shroud's story, intertwining with the era of Jesus' earthly life. As we delve into the narrative woven within the Shroud of Turin, we embark on a journey laden with intensity, unraveling the poignant moments etched into its sacred fibers, the suffering of Christ. In the agonizing moments leading to his ultimate sacrifice, Jesus endured a relentless onslaught of cruelty and torment. Each excruciating detail is captured in the very fabric of the shroud, which would later bear witness to his ordeal. Stripped of dignity and subjected to merciless beatings, the blows from flails tipped with both blunt and sharp edges tore into his flesh, leaving it ravaged. His once intact body became a tableau of agony, battered and adorned with the scars of brutality. To intensify his suffering, soldiers fashioned a rough crown of thorns, hastily weaving it from branches and pressing it onto his brow. With each thorn, fresh waves of agony surged through him, mingling with the warmth of his blood, staining his garments. Compelled to bear the weight of the cross, his bloodied attire clinging to his torn skin, Jesus embarked on a torturous journey. Each step forward became a battle against pain and fatigue, the cross's weight digging into his shoulders, exacerbating the wounds from the brutal scourging. As he faltered under the burden, the cross bore down, pressing his chest against the ground. His arm twisted unnaturally, dislocated from its socket, while the cross pressed into his neck and shoulders, leaving him partially paralyzed. With heartless indifference, soldiers hoisted him up by his dislocated arm, forcing him to continue the agonizing march. Bent over in agony, his right arm hung limp, a testament to his suffering and resilience amid unimaginable torment. Each mark narrated a story of unparalleled sacrifice, each wound a testament to the depth of his love and the enormity of his suffering. His garments, soaked in blood, were ruthlessly torn away, reopening wounds that had started to heal. Helplessly nailed to the cross, soldiers hammered nails into his already twisted and dislocated right arm, causing excruciating agony as nerves and ligaments were torn apart. In the final moments on the cross, Jesus endured unbearable pain as his body bore the weight of his sacrifice. Nails pierced his hands and feet, securing him to the wooden beams. Each breath became a struggle, the weight of his body making it hard to draw air into his lungs. With every heartbeat, pain radiated from the wounds inflicted upon him. His parched lips whispered prayers intermingled with cries of anguish. As time passed, Jesus' strength waned and his agony deepened. Each movement sent ripples of torment through his body, the weight of humanity's sins bearing down upon him, a burden he willingly accepted. Amidst his suffering, Jesus cried out, a raw and anguished plea reverberating through the heavens. It was a cry of pain and longing, and in that moment, as he yielded to death, the sacrifice was fulfilled. Following Jesus' passing, Joseph of Arimathea took a bold step, joining forces with Nicodemus, another secret admirer of Jesus. Joseph approached the Roman governor Pilate, seeking permission to attend to Jesus' body in accordance with Jewish customs. With Pilate's consent obtained, Joseph and Nicodemus carefully wrapped Jesus' body in linen strips infused with myrrh and aloe. Time was of the essence as they worked diligently on the eve of the Sabbath, just before the commencement of the Jewish Sabbath rest. Racing against time, Joseph and Nicodemus swiftly placed Jesus in a tomb Joseph had purchased, located in a nearby garden close to the Crucifixion site. As recounted in the Gospel of John, Simon Peter later entered the tomb following Jesus' resurrection and discovered the shroud along with the napkin that had covered Jesus' head. An intriguing detail in the narrative of Jesus' burial and resurrection is that the napkin remained separate from the shroud. Deciphering the mystery of the shroud, scientists have spent decades debating the possible mechanisms behind the mysterious image imprinted on it. Some speculate that radiation, akin to invisible energy capable of altering matter, may have played a role. Alexander Barkov, a Russian scientist, proposed the theory that the image could have formed when the cloth was rapidly exposed to intense light. Others suggest that specialized forms of radiation, such as X-rays or ultraviolet rays, might have been involved in creating the image. Regardless of the exact mechanism, researchers concur that the radiation, whatever its nature, emanated from above the cloth. Paolo Di Lazzaro, an Italian researcher, had some intriguing theories. He suggested that the radiation, which he believed to be ultraviolet light, was far more intense than any ultraviolet light we have today. According to him, it would have required extremely rapid bursts of light, much quicker than the blink of an eye and immensely powerful, on the scale of billions of watts. Imagine a burst of light so swift and potent that it could imprint an image on cloth lasting for centuries. Di Lazzaro posited that because modern technology cannot replicate an image like the one on the shroud, it couldn't have been fabricated in medieval times, as some skeptics argue. However, for those who view it as sacred, the explanation is straightforward. Whatever caused the image, whether radiation, ultraviolet light, or something beyond our comprehension, originated from beyond our world. To Christians worldwide, it's evident that the radiation emanated from divine light connected to Jesus' ascension to heaven. Alberto Carpentieri, a professor at the Turin Polytechnic Institute, proposed another intriguing hypothesis. He suggested that the image might have been a result of nuclear emissions triggered by a massive earthquake believed to have occurred in Jerusalem in 33 AD. What lends weight to this theory is that the Gospels indeed mention a significant earthquake following Christ's crucifixion. According to Carpentieri's research, neutron emissions produced by the earthquake could have been responsible for creating the image on the shroud. These emissions might have also influenced the levels of radiocarbon, leading to inaccuracies in dating the shroud. Carpentieri and his team of researchers proposed that the high-frequency pressure waves generated by the earthquake's impact on the Earth's crust may have triggered nuclear emissions. Carpentieri suggests that these emitted neutrons could have interacted with nitrogen atoms in the linen cloth, initiating a chemical reaction that led to the formation of the face image on the shroud. Additionally, this interaction might have influenced the results of the carbon dating process. The controversy surrounding the age of the shroud dates back to the 1980s, when the Vatican assumed control of the relic and conducted a series of tests to uncover its mysteries regarding composition, origin, and age. One of these tests included carbon-14 dating, carried out at the University of Oxford, the University of Arizona, and the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. Surprisingly, all three tests, with a 95% confidence level, concluded that the fabric dated between 1260 and 1390 AD, positioning the shroud's creation over a millennium after Jesus Christ's death. To bolster their findings, researchers pointed out that the radiocarbon dating closely aligns with historical records of the shroud's first documented appearance in 1353, credited to Geoffrey de Charny, who purportedly brought the artifact to Larry. Numerous scholars have questioned the accuracy of the carbon dating conducted on the Shroud of Turin. One notable chemist, Raymond Rogers, highlighted significant disparities in the results. He found that while the edges of the shroud contained 37% vanillin, an organic compound expected to degrade over time, the main body of the shroud had 0%. The absence of vanillin in the primary section of the shroud suggests that it could be much older than the carbon dating indicates. The primary issue with the carbon dating stems from the selection of samples for analysis. When the Vatican provided portions of the shroud to 3 universities for carbon dating, they chose small clippings from the edges. Rogers contended that if samples had been taken from the center of the shroud, the dating would likely indicate an older age than the officially reported result. Additionally, Rogers highlighted the absence of vanillin detection in the linen of the shroud fibers, a characteristic seen in other ancient linens like those from the Dead Sea Scrolls, which suggests an older age for the shroud. Based on the vanillin loss, Rogers estimated that the shroud could be anywhere from 1,300 to 3,000 years old, further raising doubts about the accuracy of the carbon dating findings. In 2011, significant discoveries in DNA analysis and digital imaging emerged when a team led by Salvatore LaRusso from the University of Bologna conducted a fascinating study on the Shroud of Turin. Utilizing advanced digital image processing on 2 photographs of the shroud, including a well-known negative captured by Giuseppe Enri in 1931, they conducted a thorough analysis but found no images of flowers, coins, or other objects on the shroud. Then, in 2015, another compelling study surfaced. This time, Italian researcher Baruch and his team published their findings in scientific reports. They examined DNA samples obtained from the shroud and its backing cloth during vacuuming sessions conducted in 1977 and 1988. Their research unveiled traces of DNA from 19 different types of plants originating from various regions, including the Mediterranean, Central Europe, North Africa, the Middle East, Eastern Asia, and the Americas. The investigation went beyond plant DNA, uncovering human mitochondrial DNA sequences corresponding to various ethnic groups and geographical regions, including Europe, North and East Africa, the Middle East, and India. Additionally, they detected DNA from non-human sources, including various birds and even a marine worm typically found in the northern Pacific Ocean near Canada. These findings offered a global snapshot of the diverse biological materials that had interacted with the shroud over centuries, further adding to its already enigmatic history. Further examination of the DNA from pollen and dust collected from the Shroud of Turin revealed an intriguing discovery. The DNA indicated that numerous individuals from various parts of the world had come into contact with the shroud over time. Scientists explained that this diverse array of DNA does not discount the possibility of the shroud originating in medieval Europe. Rather, it aligns with the historical trajectory believed to have been taken by the shroud, possibly originating in the Near East. What's particularly fascinating is that these results suggest a tantalizing possibility. The linen cloth may have been produced in India. This revelation adds another dimension to the shroud's complex and extensive history, indicating that its origins and travels were even more intricate than previously assumed. Discrepancies, debates, and new revelations continue to surround the shroud. While some researchers commend the image on the Shroud of Turin as anatomically accurate, others contend it might be a skillful forgery. In 2007, archaeologists discovered a crucified Roman near Venice, whose heel wounds matched those of another known victim, Jehohanan, but did not correspond to the wounds depicted on the shroud. Additionally, no known crucifixion victims exhibit evidence of wrist wounds, as depicted on the shroud. Critics like Joe Nickel in 1983 and Gregory S. Paul in 2010 have highlighted that the proportions of the image are not realistic. Paul argued that the facial and bodily proportions on the shroud are implausible for a real person, noting discrepancies such as a disproportionately small forehead, unnaturally long and uneven arms, and incorrect distances from the eyebrows to the top of the head. These features, they suggested, are more akin to the style of a Gothic artist than to those of a real human body. In 2018, researchers undertook an experimental bloodstain pattern analysis, BPA, to comprehend how blood flows from the wounds of a crucified individual and to compare these patterns with those present on the Shroud of Turin. Their discoveries shed light on the matter. They found that the blood patterns on the forearms and the back of the hand did not correspond, indicating that these blood flows likely occurred at different moments due to a specific sequence of movements. Additionally, the blood rivulets on the front of the image did not match the lines on the lower back, even when considering multiple instances of bleeding at varying times. These disparities suggest that the bloodstains on the shroud do not align with what one would anticipate from a genuine burial cloth. Instead, they suggest the likelihood that the shroud serves as an artistic or instructional representation rather than an authentic relic. The incongruent blood patterns imply that the image was deliberately crafted to convey a particular narrative rather than naturally formed by the wounds of a crucified body. Raymond E. Brown also noted that a body depicted in the relaxed position shown on the shroud would not naturally position its hands to cover its genitals as depicted. It seems that the right arm and hand were elongated to enable this portrayal. This amalgamation of anatomical inconsistencies leads some specialists to question whether the shroud truly represents the genuine burial cloth of a crucified individual or rather an artistic creation from the Gothic period. Luigi Garlascelli, a professor of organic chemistry at the University of Pavia, asserted that he replicated a full-sized version of the Shroud of Turin using only techniques available in medieval times. He began by laying a linen sheet over a volunteer and rubbing. It's fascinating that the napkin remained distinct from the shroud, adding a poignant element to the tale of Jesus' burial and resurrection. For years, scientists have pondered over how the enigmatic image on the shroud might have originated. Some speculate it could be due to radiation, an invisible energy capable of altering matter. Alexander Barkov, a Russian scientist, proposed that it might have occurred when the cloth was suddenly exposed to intense light. Others suggested that specialized forms of radiation, like X-rays or ultraviolet rays, could have been involved. They unanimously agree that whatever the radiation was, it emanated from above the cloth. Paolo de Lazzaro, an Italian researcher, put forth intriguing theories. He believed the radiation, which he identified as ultraviolet light, was even more potent than any ultraviolet light we have today. He suggested it would have to be incredibly swift bursts of light, far faster than the blink of an eye, and immensely powerful, akin to billions of watts. Imagine a burst of light so rapid and intense that it could imprint an image on cloth, lasting for centuries. De Lazzaro argues that because contemporary technology cannot replicate an image like the one on the shroud, it couldn't have been forged in medieval times, as some skeptics claim. However, for those who perceive its sanctity, the explanation is straightforward. Whatever caused the image, whether radiation, ultraviolet light, or another phenomenon, originated from beyond our world. For Christians worldwide, it's evident that the radiation stemmed from divine light associated with Jesus' ascension to heaven. Alberto Carpentieri, a professor at the Turin Polytechnic Institute, suggests that the image on the shroud might have been caused by nuclear emissions resulting from a substantial earthquake believed to have occurred in Jerusalem in 33 AD. What makes this theory intriguing is that the Gospels indeed mention a significant earthquake following the crucifixion of Christ, lending support to Carpentieri's hypothesis. According to Carpentieri's research, neutron emissions generated by the earthquake could have been responsible for creating the image on the shroud. These emissions might have also interfered with the levels of radiocarbon, leading to inaccurate dating of the shroud. Carpentieri and his team speculate that the high-frequency pressure waves generated in the Earth's crust by the earthquake could have triggered nuclear emissions. He argues that these emitted neutrons might have interacted with nitrogen atoms in the linen cloth, initiating a chemical reaction that resulted in the formation of the facial image on the shroud. Additionally, this interaction could have influenced the results of the carbon dating process. The controversy surrounding the age of the shroud began in the 1980s when the Vatican assumed control of the relic and initiated a series of tests to unravel its mysteries regarding its composition, origin, and age. Among these tests was carbon-14 dating, conducted at the University of Oxford, the University of Arizona, and the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. Remarkably, all three tests, with a 95% confidence level, concluded that the fabric originated between 1260 and 1390 AD. This places the shroud's creation over 1,000 years after Jesus Christ's death. To bolster their findings, researchers highlighted that the radiocarbon dating closely aligns with historical records of the shroud's first documented appearance in 1353, attributed to Geoffrey de Charny, who purportedly brought the artifact to Larray. Numerous scholars have voiced skepticism regarding the accuracy of the carbon dating conducted on the Shroud of Turin. One notable chemist, Raymond Rogers, underscored significant disparities in the findings. He observed that while the edges of the shroud contained 37% vanillin, an organic compound expected to degrade over time, the body of the shroud contained none. This absence of vanillin in the primary section of the shroud suggests that its age could be much greater than indicated by the carbon dating. The fundamental issue with the carbon dating lies in the selection of samples for analysis. When the Vatican distributed portions of the shroud to 3 universities for carbon dating, they chose small clippings from the corners. Rogers argued that if samples had been taken from the center of the shroud, the dating would likely reveal an older age than officially reported. Additionally, Rogers noted the inability to detect vanillin in the linen of the shroud fibers, a characteristic observed in other ancient linens, such as those from the Dead Sea Scrolls, indicating an older age for the shroud. Based on the absence of vanillin, Rogers estimated that the shroud could be anywhere between 1,300 and 3,000 years old, further raising doubts about the accuracy of the carbon dating results. In 2011, groundbreaking DNA discoveries and digital revelations emerged when a team led by Salvatore LaRusso from the University of Bologna conducted an intriguing study on the Shroud of Turin. They employed advanced digital image processing on 2 photographs of the shroud, including a renowned negative taken by Giuseppe Enri in 1931. Despite their exhaustive analysis, they found no images of flowers, coins, or other objects on the shroud. Fast forward to 2015, when another captivating study surfaced. This time, Italian researcher Baruch and his team published their findings in scientific reports. They examined DNA samples collected from the shroud and its backing cloth during vacuuming sessions in 1977 and 1988. Their research unveiled traces of DNA from 19 different types of plants originating from diverse regions, including the Mediterranean, Central Europe, North Africa, the Middle East, Eastern Asia, and the Americas. The research didn't just focus on plant DNA, it also unveiled human mitochondrial DNA sequences. These sequences corresponded to various ethnic groups and geographic regions, including Europe, North and East Africa, the Middle East, and India. Additionally, they discovered DNA from non-human sources, such as various birds and even a marine worm typically found in the northern Pacific Ocean near Canada. These findings offered a global glimpse into the diverse biological materials that had interacted with the shroud over the centuries, adding another layer of intrigue to its already mysterious history. After meticulously analyzing the DNA of pollen and dust collected from the Shroud of Turin, researchers made a remarkable discovery. The DNA revealed that individuals from different parts of the world had come into contact with the shroud over the centuries. The scientists clarified that this diverse array of DNA does not negate the possibility of the shroud originating in medieval Europe. In fact, it aligns well with the historical trajectory believed to have been taken by the shroud, possibly commencing in the Near East. What's even more captivating is that the results suggest a compelling possibility. The linen cloth might have been produced in India. This newfound information adds another dimension to the shroud's rich history, indicating that its origins and journeys were even more intricate and expansive than previously presumed. The shroud continues to be enveloped in discrepancies, debates, and discoveries. While many researchers have lauded the anatomical precision of the image on the Shroud of Turin, others argue that it could be an ingenious forgery. In 2007, archaeologists discovered a crucified Roman near Venice, whose heel wounds matched those on another known victim, Johannan, but did not align with the wounds depicted on the shroud. Furthermore, no historical crucifixion victims exhibit evidence of wrist wounds, as depicted on the shroud. Critics like Joe Nickel in 1983 and Gregory S. Paul in 2010 have highlighted that the proportions of the image are unrealistic. Paul contended that the facial and bodily proportions on the shroud are unattainable for a real individual. He observed that the forehead is too small, the arms are unnaturally long and uneven in length, and the distance from the eyebrows to the top of the head is incorrect. These characteristics, they suggested, bear more resemblance to the work of a Gothic artist than to a genuine human body. In 2018, a team of researchers embarked on an experimental bloodstain pattern analysis, BPA, aimed at comprehending the dynamics of blood flow from the wounds of a crucified individual and comparing these patterns to those imprinted on the Shroud of Turin. Their findings yielded intriguing insights. They observed discrepancies in the blood patterns on the forearms and the back of the hand, indicating that these blood flows likely occurred at different times, following a specific sequence of movements. Moreover, the alignment of blood rivulets on the front of the image did not correspond with those on the lower back, even when considering multiple instances of bleeding at various times. These inconsistencies raised doubts about the authenticity of the bloodstains on the shroud, suggesting instead that it might be an artistic or instructional representation rather than a genuine relic. The mismatched blood patterns imply that the image was intentionally crafted to convey a particular narrative rather than being naturally formed by the wounds of a crucified body. Raymond E. Brown also noted that the relaxed position depicted on the shroud does not naturally allow the hands to cover the genitals as shown. It seems that the right arm and hand were elongated to achieve this positioning. This collection of anatomical irregularities leads some experts to question whether the shroud is indeed the authentic burial cloth of a crucified individual, suggesting instead that it could be an artistic creation from the Gothic period. Luigi Garlascelli, a professor of organic chemistry at the University of Pavia, claimed to have recreated a full-sized version of the Shroud of Turin using only medieval-era techniques. He began by placing a linen sheet over a volunteer and applying an acidic pigment, followed by aging the shroud in an oven and then washing it to remove the pigment. To replicate the original further, he added bloodstains, scorches, and water stains. Although Professor Giulio Fanti remarked that Garlascelli's method seemed incapable of producing an image with the most crucial characteristics of the Turin shroud, Garlascelli's reproduction was featured in a National Geographic documentary. His technique involved a bas-relief approach for the face, resulting in an image resembling the Turin shroud, but lacking its uniformity and intricate details. Emily Craig and Randall Bray, scientists with a keen interest in historical art techniques, delved into the possible methods medieval artists might have employed to create the Shroud of Turin. Their exploration led them to experiment with a dust transfer technique. Beginning with a depiction resembling Jesus on newsprint, crafted using carbon dust mixed with collagen to replicate materials available in the 13th and 14th centuries, they proceeded to transfer this image onto linen. Placing the newsprint on a table and covering it with linen, they firmly pressed the fabric against the newsprint using a wooden spoon's flat side. This process yielded a lifelike reddish-brown image on the linen, exhibiting a three-dimensional quality devoid of brushstrokes, thereby suggesting the potential for creating a convincing likeness through techniques accessible during medieval times. Now, onto today's subscriber pick. In the dimly lit chamber of a museum, a gathering of scholars encircled a glass case housing the enigmatic artifact, the Shroud of Turin. Its delicate fabric seemed to whisper ancient tales, captivating the imagination of all who gazed upon it. Dr. Sofia Alvarez, a distinguished historian and skeptic, regarded the relic with a blend of curiosity and skepticism. As she scrutinized the cloth's intricate patterns, a revelation dawned upon her. It appeared that the fabric harbored secrets capable of upending the very narrative of history. With trembling hands, she peeled back the layers of mystery, uncovering a truth concealed for ages. The Shroud of Turin, she realized, transcended mere religious significance. It bore witness to the life and death of a figure pivotal in shaping history, Jesus Christ. Within its fibers lay microscopic traces of pollen, fragments of DNA, and faint impressions mirroring accounts of crucifixion wounds. In a moment of profound clarity, Dr. Alvarez grasped the enormity of her discovery. The title of her groundbreaking paper flashed before her eyes. The Shroud of Turin reveals a startling truth about Jesus Christ. With resolve, she embarked on a quest to unveil the untold narrative veiled within the folds of time. Revealing parallels, a primary concern among scholars examining the Shroud of Turin through a religious lens, revolves around its alignment with the descriptions of Jesus' burial provided in the New Testament. If inconsistencies arise between the two narratives, doubts emerge regarding the shroud's authenticity as Jesus' burial cloth. The New Testament offers some insights into Jesus' burial, though it does not delve into precise details. One aspect often scrutinized in comparing the New Testament accounts with the shroud is the role of the napkin, a detail seldom emphasized. Some contend that the napkin should bear the image instead of the primary burial cloth because it was placed flat over the face. However, research into ancient Jewish burial customs reveals that the napkin was typically folded and tied around the head to secure the jaw during rigor mortis. This tradition finds support in both Jewish texts and the New Testament. Intriguingly, the figure depicted on the shroud also features a cloth tied around the jaw, aligning with these ancient practices. Rather than a contradiction, this detail serves as corroboration of the methods depicted on the shroud. Another point of contention is the apparent absence of washing before burial, a customary practice in Jewish traditions. Although none of the Gospels explicitly mention Jesus' body being washed, it is inferred from Jewish burial customs. However, the Code of Jewish Law outlines exceptions to this washing ritual, such as in cases of death by government decree. This insight sheds light on the matter, suggesting that exceptions to the washing custom may have existed, even in Jesus' case. According to ancient laws, leaving blood on the body was considered a form of punishment for offenses against the state. Therefore, if Jesus' burial adhered to Jewish customs as described in the Bible, it is plausible that he was not washed before burial. There's curiosity surrounding the type of linen used in Jesus' burial. While some envision a wrapping akin to Egyptian mummification, the biblical term implies wrapping or folding, allowing for interpretation. Interestingly, ancient Jewish burial customs bear resemblance to those depicted on the shroud. For instance, in an Essene burial ground, individuals were laid to rest in a manner akin to the figure on the shroud. Additionally, the Code of Jewish Law dictates that those executed should be interred in a single, simple linen sheet. Even Lazarus, upon being resurrected, was found bound around the head, wrists and ankles, echoing the depiction on the shroud. Another point of contention is whether Jesus was wrapped in one or multiple strips of linen. Certain passages in the Bible mention grave clothes both singularly and plurally. However, scientific analysis indicates that the figure on the shroud was enveloped in at least 4 linen strips, encompassing the shroud itself, a head napkin, and bindings around the wrists and ankles. These discrepancies form the crux of comparisons between the shroud and the New Testament. An exegetical examination of relevant biblical passages fails to discredit the authenticity of the shroud. Rather, it harmonizes with the evidence and bolsters the depiction of burial methods seen on the shroud. Such burial practices seem consistent with customs observed by Jews during Jesus' era, as evidenced by diverse sources. Hence, determining the authenticity of the shroud necessitates thorough scientific and historical scrutiny. Drawing parallels between the gospel narratives of Jesus' suffering and the depiction of the man on the shroud reveals striking resemblances. The individual wrapped in the shroud bore a multitude of injuries, including lacerations to the scalp, facial contusions, and over 120 wounds. Following a severe beating, he carried a heavy burden on his shoulders, leaving distinct marks on his shoulder blades. His journey was marked by stumbling and falling, resulting in bruising on his knees. Most notably, he exhibited 5 significant wounds associated with crucifixion: punctures in both wrists and feet, along with a wound in the right side of the chest, from which blood mixed with a watery fluid flowed. Pathologists observed signs of rigor mortis, with wounds discernible as pre- or post-mortem. The correlation between Jesus' ordeal depicted in the Gospels and the wounds depicted on the shroud is remarkable. Moreover, the occurrence of uncommon events shared by Jesus and the figure on the shroud is equally compelling. Both endured the placement of a crown of thorns upon their heads and suffered severe beatings. Unlike typical crucifixion victims, neither Jesus nor the individual on the shroud had their ankles broken to expedite death. Instead, they were pierced in the chest post-mortem. Additionally, they were individually interred, wrapped in costly linen, and buried hastily. Considering these unique parallels between Jesus and the individual on the shroud, scholars have concluded that it is highly improbable for 2 distinct individuals to undergo such identical crucifixion experiences. Some studies suggest a mere 1 in 225 billion chance of them being different persons. Even the most skeptical calculations yield remarkably low probabilities that Jesus and the figure on the shroud are not one and the same. Moreover, the absence of contradictions in their experiences further strengthens the likelihood of their identity being identical. Over the centuries, the Shroud of Turin has been revered as the authentic burial cloth of Jesus, cherished as a sacred relic. Unlike recently unearthed artifacts that merely evoke the memory of Jesus, the shroud has always been venerated as genuine, predating the era of modern scientific scrutiny. This enduring reverence reinforces the connection between Jesus and the figure depicted on the shroud. While definitive identification of the individual wrapped in the shroud remains elusive, compelling evidence suggests that it could indeed be Jesus' actual burial garment. Numerous subtle details align without contradiction, further substantiated by the scientific consensus, affirming the artifact's authenticity, dismissing any claims of forgery. Evidence supporting Jesus' resurrection. When examining the evidence for Jesus' resurrection, the shroud offers three compelling arguments. Firstly, while numerous burial shrouds exist, none, except for the Shroud of Turin, bear an image. Most merely exhibit blood and decomposition stains. What distinguishes the shroud is its unique double body image, visible in both positive and negative forms, suggesting it was created by an intense burst of light or heat. Recent experimental findings further corroborate this theory. The idea of radiation emanating from a figure resembling Jesus carries significant implications for the resurrection, particularly when juxtaposed with historical narratives. Secondly, scientific scrutiny reveals a conspicuous absence of decomposition on the shroud, indicating that the body did not linger within the cloth for an extended duration. Even under the arid conditions of the Middle East, the lack of decomposition adds an additional layer of mystery to the shroud's origin and authenticity. Nevertheless, skeptics may raise objections, positing various scenarios where a body might have been removed from a burial cloth. This is where the third piece of evidence emerges as particularly compelling. Examination by pathologists revealed no signs of unwrapping on the shroud. Instead, the cloth directly contacted the body, with bloodstains transferring directly onto it and partially adhering. The intact blood clots present in nearly every wound, along with the undisturbed boundaries of these stains, indicate that the body remained undisturbed within the shroud, further bolstering its potential authenticity. These points carry considerable weight individually, but collectively, they form a compelling body of evidence. Moreover, the potential burst of radiation from the deceased figure adds an intriguing dimension to the enigma. What heightens the intrigue further is that all this evidence is empirical and scientifically verifiable, lending it even more credibility. Significantly, the evidence presented by the shroud seamlessly aligns with the robust historical evidence supporting Jesus' resurrection. Indeed, the evidence from the shroud is so substantial that its absence as Jesus' burial garment would pose a significant challenge, casting doubt on who else might have seemingly experienced resurrection. What are your thoughts on the authenticity of the Shroud of Turin? Share your insights in the comments below.